Security Council resolution, passing today's resolution was the easy part. The hard and desperately necessary part is implementation. The world now needs to stand united on behalf of implementation so that there are no more broken promises, no more delays, no more coupling minor concessions with cruel and shameless attacks on civilians. Thank you, and I'd be happy to take a few questions.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. As a great defender for human rights, do you think that this resolution is going to solve this humanitarian crisis in Syria? And what's your response on Ambassador Churkin saying that you've tried many times to politicize the humanitarian situation in Syria? Thank you.
I think we should go back to first principles. The war in Syria has got to end. That is imperative. There has to be a political solution. That is why the antics of the Syrian regime in Geneva were so disturbing and so disheartening to so many. Within the context of a war that is ongoing, because the Syrian regime is unwilling to negotiate seriously, this resolution is important for two reasons. It's the specificity of this resolution that I draw your attention to. You know, the Security Council is famous for its generalized statements demanding progress and the like. This creates a set of very specific implementable provisions, and we will know whether they have been implemented and where they have not. The specificity of each of the besieged areas being named, the specific demand for cross-border, for the Syrian regime to allow cross-border access, the specific reference to barrel bombs. And, you know, again, we are heartened that our Russian colleagues have joined us in demanding the end of the use of indiscriminate weapons like barrel bombs. The reference to starvation as a weapon of war and how that is illegal under international law, and how all parties, but particularly the regime, need to stop using food and medicine as a weapon of war. I mean, these are very, very specific provisions. So I think it is important, but as I said, both in the Council and as I will say to you here today, resolution is just words. It is implementation that matters. And that's what we are starting measuring right now.
Are you politicizing the aids as Ambassador Churkin was accusing the United States before?
I'm focused, as I hope everyone in the Council is focused, on the fate of the Syrian people and the deplorable suffering that they have undergone, not just for the life of this war, but with particular intensity since the last time the Security Council spoke with its presidential statement in October.
To ensure implementation, what further steps is the Security Council willing to take in event of noncompliance? And in extension to that, how does this resolution obligate all parties to ensure cross-border access for aid when there's an existing GA resolution that basically enshrines national sovereignty over UN agencies having free access to be able to deliver aid across borders?
Well, first let me say on your first question on enforcement, I mean, the language is very specific in this resolution. It commits to come back to the Council, but commits to take further steps. And as you know, previous resolutions have been vetoed over weaker language than that. And so we believe that that language is actually a significant hook and a significant commitment by the parties on the Security Council. In terms of cross-border access, we are pleased particularly that our Council colleagues who have significant leverage with the regime, with the Syrian regime that has been denying cross-border access at certain border crossings, that they have signed on to that demand for cross-border access. And so we know that implementation, it's not like the fairies come out of the sky and the angels descend and suddenly implementation happens. It happens because those of us who have leverage on various parties on the ground use that leverage. And so we, again, are not naive. The track record of compliance with any UN product, as you point out, has been abysmal for the 3 years of the conflict. But this resolution goes farther than we've been able to get in 3 years. And you saw that every member of the Council raised their hands in support of the provision demanding cross-border access. I think, as my Australian colleague pointed out, The UN estimates are that if land convoys could move across borders by the most direct routes, more than 1 million people could be fed and reached who are not being reached today.
Thank you. Ambassador Ghosana had mentioned that it was unfortunate that certain amendments that were proposed to the resolution regarding transfer of arms to the parties in the conflict were not accepted. What is the U.S. position on those amendments?
All I will say is that we did not object to those amendments, and I would refer you to other council colleagues on that question.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The resolution passed today by the Security Council makes strong demands on the Syrian regime to lift the siege in besieged areas, end the abhorrent use of barrel bombs, and approve the United Nations and its partners to deliver aid across borders. It demands an end to violence, an end to human rights abuses, arbitrary detention and torture, an end to the militarization of medical facilities, very significantly the departure of all foreign fighters from Syria, and demands implementation of the Geneva I communique. In fact, in total, there are more than 15 very specific demands in this resolution. Now the Syrian regime must immediately heed these demands. The Council has said that it intends to take further steps if this resolution is not complied with. It will come back to this issue in 30 days and every 30 days thereafter. And the United Kingdom will intensify our efforts with other members of the UN Security Council to ensure that the demands set out in this resolution are met. Yes, of course, we would have liked to have seen this resolution be even stronger than it is. But we are committed to coming back to the Council to seek further action if the demands are not met. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Do you still need the Syrian government consent in order to send humanitarian aid to the Syrian people? And also, how are you going to help solve the political track, the impasse on the political track based on this resolution? Thank you.
Well, this resolution is focused on the humanitarian access in particular, although it does have very specific demands elsewhere, as I've set out. The OP6 of this resolution is very clear. It demands that the Syrian government allow the UN and its implementing partners to provide humanitarian access across international borders. So that is a specific demand on the Syrian regime, and we will hold them to it. In terms of the political process, we very much support Brahimi and his efforts in Geneva II. It's very unfortunate that Geneva II did not reach any substantive progress. It is clear that the fault for that lack of progress lay with the Syrian regime, which refused to engage on the heart of the negotiations, which is the political transition and the establishment of a transitional governing body. Mr. Brahimi will be coming next week to New York and will be briefing the Security Council, and obviously the Security Council will want to consider what attitude it takes on the political process on that occasion.
In terms of this idea of further steps being triggered by noncompliance, Ambassador Churkin used this word, it's not automatic, there's no automaticity. So I wanted to know, what's your view of what happens if there's noncompliance? And also, I noticed that Hezbollah and Quds Force were dropped from the resolution, but Al-Qaeda remains in. How should we interpret that in terms of naming one group and not naming another?
Well, there were a lot of changes made in the text of the resolution during the negotiating process. That is a normal process of negotiation in the Security Council. The key thing on this occasion was to secure a unanimous adoption, and we're delighted that such a strong resolution was adopted unanimously. In terms of the trigger mechanism, it is a strong trigger mechanism, much stronger than in some previous resolutions, some of which indeed were vetoed. But Ambassador Churkin is right that there would need to be a further decision by the Security Council if specific action under Articles 41 or Article 42 were to be taken. That is clear that the Council would have to take a further decision. But the language which says that the Council expresses its intent to take further steps in the event of non-compliance is very specific and much stronger than we might have feared. Thank you very much.
Bonjour. So far, my predecessors have catered to the English-speaking minority, so you will understand I try to widen our audience by speaking in French. Bonjour. Les membres du Conseil de sécurité ont donc adopté à l'unanimité la résolution 2139 qui demande au régime syrien et à l'opposition de faciliter l'accès humanitaire aux populations civiles en Syrie. Je ne reviendrai pas sur la gravité de la situation humanitaire. 3 millions de Syriens sont en situation de détresse humanitaire. Près de la moitié de la population a dû quitter son logement. Et cela, nous le savons, en réalité parce que le régime s'attaque depuis le début du conflit aux civils, aux femmes, aux enfants, qu'il utilise les armes lourdes, qu'il utilise les missiles Scud, qu'il utilise des armes chimiques et maintenant les barils d'explosifs aux dépens de la population civile. Et ce ne sont pas des armes pour vaincre une guerre, ce sont des armes pour tuer de manière indiscriminée des civils. Dans ces conditions, on aurait pu penser qu'une résolution humanitaire serait facile à obtenir. Ça n'a pas été le cas. Cette résolution, il a fallu la négocier âprement et la France a joué tout son rôle dans ces négociations. Vous le savez, certains défendent encore le régime d'Assad et sa barbarie. Il a fallu les convaincre que bombarder des civils, ce n'est pas acceptable. Il a fallu convaincre qu'affamer des populations, ce n'est pas acceptable. Il a fallu convaincre qu'empêcher l'aide humanitaire de parvenir à ceux qui en ont besoin, ce n'est pas acceptable. Il a fallu rappeler que même la guerre a des règles. Et la plus élémentaire d'entre elles est que les civils ne doivent pas être pris pour cible. Cette négociation difficile a porté ses fruits. Nous aurions aimé avoir un texte beaucoup plus fort, mais nous avons pensé qu'il était utile de voir se réunir tous les membres du Conseil de sécurité autour d'un texte qui, pour insatisfaisant qu'il soit, on vous l'a dit, porte quand même un message fort. Il faut cesser de bombarder les civils et d'utiliser des armes de terreur comme des barils d'explosifs. Il faut lever les sièges des villes qui conduisent à la famine des populations. Il faut autoriser des pauses humanitaires. Il faut autoriser l'accès de l'aide humanitaire à travers les frontières. Et non pas restreindre l'accès de cette aide à un tout petit entonnoir à Damas qui est contrôlé par le régime. Maintenant, cette résolution, elle doit être mise en œuvre et nous devons tout faire pour qu'elle ne reste pas lettre morte. Le régime, mais aussi l'opposition, devront appliquer sans délai les décisions du Conseil de sécurité. Nous attendons donc le rapport que le secrétaire général devra nous transmettre dans 30 jours, un rapport détaillé sur l'application du texte. Il pourra nous dire si les sièges des villes énumérés dans la résolution a été levé. Il pourra nous dire si l'accès à travers les frontières a été autorisé, comme le Conseil l'exige. Et si ce n'est pas le cas, eh bien, la France proposera au Conseil de sécurité de nouvelles mesures. C'est donc un texte qui se veut opérationnel, qui se veut concret, mais dont l'application dépend naturellement de la bonne volonté du régime syrien et de l'opposition. Je vous remercie. And I will accept to answer question in English. Oui, oui.
À partir du moment où le texte dépend, vous le dites, de la bonne volonté du régime syrien, est-ce que vous en espérez réellement un impact concret sur le terrain? Et qu'est-ce qui se passe pour les humanitaires de l'ONU si jamais le texte n'est pas appliqué? Quelle sera leur attitude sur le terrain, notamment pour la fourniture d'air à travers les frontières?
Non, comme ma collègue américaine vient de le dire, nous savons très bien que cette résolution ne va pas bouleverser du jour au lendemain l'attitude d'un régime qui ne cesse de tuer, de violer toutes les règles du droit humanitaire, et cela en un jour. C'est d'abord un message, c'est un premier pas. C'est la première fois que vous avez les 15 membres du Conseil de sécurité, et en particulier, naturellement, la Fédération de Russie, qui envoie un message au régime sur le thème « Arrêtez d'utiliser les bombardements aériens ». et en particulier les barils de bombes, accepter l'aide à travers les frontières. Donc c'est un premier pas. Je vous l'ai dit très franchement, vous imaginez bien que la France aurait voté le premier projet du Luxembourg, de l'Australie, de la Jordanie, sans aucune hésitation. Nous avons dû accepter des compromis dans l'objectif d'avoir les 15 membres. Mais dans 30 jours, lorsque le rapport du secrétaire général sera sur la table, et personnellement, évidemment, je partage vos doutes sur le fait que le régime mette en œuvre la résolution, eh bien la France proposera alors des mesures.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you. Who is going to monitor the implementation of this resolution, and when do you expect to see a real difference on the ground regarding the humanitarian situation in Syria? Thank you.
It's the Secretary General who is supposed to prepare, to present, to transfer to the Council a report in 30 days. And he will do it on the basis of his own assessment. And I guess that OCHA, of course, will be the focus point to analyze the situation so that we see whether the resolution is implemented. As the difference on the ground, I can't know, really, I don't know, really. But as my Australian colleague told you, actually we could, through the borders, we could provide humanitarian aid to more than 1 million people. You look at the map of the humanitarian situation, which is prepared by OCHA, you see, for instance, in the north, on the Turkish and Iraqi border, that you have a hard-to-reach population of between 1 and 2 millions of inhabitants. So if we can send the aid through the borders, it would be a very, very quick relief.
Monsieur l'ambassadeur, quelles sont vos attentes du gouvernement syrien pour une meilleure mise en œuvre de la présente résolution et éventuellement, qu'est-ce qui pourra réellement directement changer sur le terrain?
C'est simple, il suffit qu'il mette en œuvre la résolution, c'est-à-dire qu'il arrête de bombarder les populations civiles, et notamment avec des barils de bombes, mais pas seulement avec des barils de bombes, des Scuds, des bombes à sous-munitions, par exemple, dans des zones civiles, ce qui est évidemment une violation du droit international, qu'il autorise l'aide à travers les frontières, etc., etc. Il suffit qu'il mette en œuvre cette résolution, une résolution qui a été votée par la Fédération de Russie et donc est une résolution qui n'est certainement pas hostile au régime, mais qui prend en compte la tragédie que connaît le pays. Voilà. Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup.
Resolution 2139 is an important action taken by the Security Council this morning to build on Resolution 2118 to address the situation in Syria. It sends out a strong and unanimous message to all parties in Syria. Its unanimous adoption by the Council is a result of common and constructive efforts by all the members of the Security Council. The resolution reaffirms the strong commitment to the sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity of Syria. It stressed the need to respect UN guiding principles of humanitarian emergency assistance. It spells out the obligations of all parties to do the things as required by the Security Council resolution to do. So it sets the framework for addressing the situation in Syria under the current circumstances. We strongly urge all parties in Syria to implement this resolution in good faith. China is gravely concerned at the worsening humanitarian situation in Syria. We deeply sympathize with the people in Syria, and we hope to see an early and prompt amelioration of the situation in Syria. China has been working very hard to achieve this objective, both at the political level and also in terms of providing humanitarian assistance to the refugees in Syria and also in the neighboring countries. China will certainly continue to do so. And we also support the efforts by the neighbors in Syria, by the United Nations, and also by the international community to try to help with the worsening situation in Syria. While we are talking about the humanitarian situation in Syria, we mustn't lose sight of the larger picture, and that is the political process to seek a fundamental solution to the problem we face in Syria. Nothing short of a political solution will offer a durable, comprehensive hope for the Syrian people to live in peace with prospects of development. And also, nothing short of a political process will provide a fundamental solution to the humanitarian crisis that we see in Syria. So we will work with all the other parties to make sure that the Geneva II process will continue and will bear fruit. In this respect, we support the efforts made by the Secretary General of the United Nations, Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, and also Ambassador Brahimi. It is highly important that these efforts should be continued in the following areas. Firstly, it is important to persist in resolving this situation by political means. That's a very important principle. And secondly, it is important to enable the Syrian people to determine their future. And thirdly, it is important to make sure that we have an inclusive political transitional process. Fourthly, it is important to achieve national reconciliation and unity. And fifthly, we need to continue to address the humanitarian problems of the Syrian people. China has been working with all the other parties to this end, and we certainly will continue to do so. Thank you.
Yeah. Could you say how this, in your view, how this resolution applies to the armed groups, particularly like al-Nusra and ISIS? Are they bound by it in terms of further steps? What can the Council do to gain access to places like al-Raqqa and others that are controlled by these armed groups?
Mm-hmm. It is a very complicated situation in Syria. There are all kinds of elements that are involved in Syria. And this resolution is another step on the basis of Resolution 2118. So basically, the resolutions of the Security Council have spelled out the obligations on various parties to make sure that there is, to make sure to end violence, to seek a political solution, and also to address the humanitarian problems. No matter who is responsible for the obstruction of the implementation of the Security Council resolutions, it is something that the Council needs to deal with. I think it is highly important that the resolution will be implemented in a comprehensive way so that the suffering of the Syrian people will really be alleviated and put an end to through the implementation of this resolution. Thank you.
Ambassador Ghossaina had criticized in his remarks the rejection of certain proposed amendments that would have urged the cutoff of arms transfers to the parties to the conflict in Syria. So I'd like to know if you can share China's position on those proposed amendments. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. China's position is very clear. We have highlighted the important elements of seeking a political solution to the Syrian issue. And we have been urging members of the international community to do things in favor of a political solution and to refrain from further complicating the political process of the Syrian issue. So we certainly will continue to hold that view. And in the course of the consideration of the draft resolution, of course, there were many ideas, but we have to recognize that the situation is extremely complex in Syria. We need a resolution that will be really helpful on the ground, helpful in terms of addressing the immediate problems in humanitarian nature, but also it should help with the achievement of the longer objective, of seeking a political solution to the Syrian issue in a Syrian-led, Syrian-owned political process. And that is extremely important. I think the result of the resolution is the kind that the Security Council can agree to unanimously. And we certainly hope that this resolution will be implemented in both letter and spirit, and all parties will work in support of calming the situation, calming the things down in Syria, reducing and stopping violence in Syria, and also in support of the political process. That's a responsible thing to do. Thank you. Last one.
Ambassador, would China support stronger terms in case of non-compliance to this resolution? Thank you.
I think we have to see the implementation of this draft of this resolution to determine what, if there's any need for Council to take further action, and what kind of action would be the best approach to make sure that we meet the objectives for the humanitarian situation and also for the longer issue of a political solution. Thank you. Have a nice weekend.